Sucking the guts, guys, with the Ghostbusters.
Isn't that right? Alright, it's recording.
Shit, where'd it go? Oh, yeah. It's classic. Great novel. Technical difficulties. As in with every endeavor, when you first venture out, you fuck things up. It's okay. It won't hurt nobody. Everybody will get home safe and have awesome stories to tell. That's what I always tell people. You'll get home in one piece, you will have no outstanding warrants, and you'll have an excellent story. All right, we live? Good? Good to go? Yes. Okay. All right, gentlemen. This is our first attempt at a podcast here. It seems like every asshole on the planet has a podcast, so why not us, right? I definitely do. So we got Eddie. Introduce yourself to the world.
What's up?
Be advised that as we enter into this space of trying to voice our opinions in this weird world, it's going to get a little... 10 people might watch it. 10,000 people might watch it, right? That's just how kind of some of this shit goes, you know. So
at this point, not even my mom is watching, so it's
we can
right
say
now
anything.
It's just us, but yeah, we can say whatever we want at this point.
That's how most greatness starts. Just a couple of gentlemen. Do you guys want to drink, by the way? I didn't offer.
I did notice you got a couple fingers of scotch there.
Yes. Are we a Scotch man?
I am, but I'll
stick
right
with.
now I'm good.
Okay.
But I might partake in a minute.
Please excuse my indulgence.
What do you got there? What are you drinking on?
Let's have some. There we go.
Glenlivet, 15 year. Yeah, maybe we can start eventually getting some Scotch sponsorships. Drink for free on the show.
That would be great. That would be great. Still legal in Arizona to drink, so we're good there. For now. It's legal to do a lot of shit. Yeah, actually, I just got back from Cali.
Oil. No more. That's not legal.
That's not legal anymore? Damn.
Oh, wow.
What the hell, Arizona?
Struck it down.
Why? Because it helps you clear your joints. It helps you just relax, no pain.
Yeah, it's good for you, so why would we want... No, the...
Oh, jeez.
Apparently the wording in the law is something to do with the dried flower, and the state of Arizona considers the resin of the plant to be different than the dried flower. So it's basically just some word mush that they've now decided that not only are the THC extracts, like the oils and waxes that can get you super baked, those are illegal, but also the over-the-counter CBD oils, which people now can get for massages or joint pain and things like that, which are really helpful for it. Those are also fall under that category, so they would be considered illegal.
So now Schedule 1. CBD is Schedule 1. Damn, Arizona.
Well, just looking at New Times here, there's an article saying medical cannabis extracts like vape pen oils are illegal.
Eesh.
So including that, now you're looking at those people, those are highly popular. People are all over those.
So if you got those vape pens out there, get rid of them. Properly dispose of those things before you find yourself in jail.
And it kind of makes sense they would go after that because it's very discreet. It doesn't smell like the flower does. Much easier for them to track and things like that. But I mean, I talked to a guy recently who sells it on the black market. He's not participating in the legal market of it, and this was a boon for him because now the cartridges are going to be in high demand again, and he could sort of extort more money out of these being illegal when people really are just getting help from them. It's kind of ridiculous.
You get the feeling that people don't study their history. We look at Prohibition, which was a political thing, mostly political, right? It was politicized. It was, they jumped on husbands beating their wives, and then they appealed to Christianity. How if you're Christian, you shouldn't be drinking, right? You should be a stand-up fellow. Yeah, that created the crime spree in the 1920s, right? All the way through the 1940s, and they don't read history with some of this legislation. People who actually read things and understand the context of what they're doing, it kind of just seems to pass over their head, right? It's like, oh man, I was just thinking about that. I was just in California. I was in LA. It's a very nice, beautiful, beautiful weather. Moderately intolerable to be in that city for more than just a couple of days because there's just so many people. Everyone's honking their horns. But weed is legal there. And you smell it pretty much everywhere you go. That's probably my only problem with
Out of LA's quarters.
yeah. That's my only problem with weed, is that it smells like bear shit if it's really good, right? And you just can smell it from a block away. You're like, someone is getting baked right now, and I can smell it, and it's like, it's a little offensive. So I can understand the point of view of, hey, my neighbor is always smoking weed and it's seeping into my house, right? Because, my neighbor's a cunt and likes to get high and, great, perfect, now I got to deal with it. I get that. But to take something like CBD, I like to work out. I do jiu-jitsu. It's very taxing on your joints. That sort of thing could be perfect. So now I just got to take ibuprofen and hope that my liver doesn't fail when I'm in my 60s.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm going to fucking die.
But also, like, along with the lines like you were saying about the prohibition, it's like the amount of crime that came out of that, because everything went dark and went into that black market, and you got all these crazy gangster situation that happened. But again, like, that's kind of, there's still money to be made there in the system, because, the whole prison system and the law enforcement system, all that, there's still money to be made there.
We make money for incarcerating people for bullshit.
Exactly. So it's probably better for them, and a system probably looks at it better to have things illegal and continue to have these crime rates be high, because this money's being funneled from the feds over. So
private prisons, right? Privatization of prisons.
It's always been frustrating to me too. It's like a cruel joke of nature that, one of the least harmless and one could say most useful narcotics that's out there is cannabis, and it stays in your system for a month in drug tests. You can smell it across the street.
It stays in longer.
Coke,
like you're fat.
You literally snort it up your nose, and you can't smell it anywhere. I mean, you can't. It's gone in 2 days.
You just see the effects.
It's always been kind of a funny trick that nature played. But yeah, I mean, going back to what he said about just the prison system that's in place, and you have to wonder if the judge in this case in the judicial system, I don't know if it was a panel or what it was, I'm not sure, had any influence from the executive branch of the administration that's in office right now. You've got Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump sort of going gung-ho on marijuana now and going back to draconian sort of measures that they want to take for prosecuting this and that. That definitely, I think, has an influence on the other parts of the judiciary. So
it's a very interesting time. By the way, I don't think we introduced you. We introduced Eddie.
We should probably take some time.
Eddie's the main man. We just went right into fucking weed and CBD. We're getting to the point on this discussion.
You hit my passion point.
How did I get there? Oh, fucking alcohol. That's what happened.
The cause and solution to all
Any good story
problems.
Starts with alcohol.
Exactly. My name's Justin, and
we just met, by the way.
Good to meet you.
Again.
Good to meet you. You've done well with the setup here.
It's kind of like, this is kind of like high school right here, but I'm from the south side. It's okay.
And about 4 years ago, me and my buddy did a World Cup podcast, and it was very similar, like just the setup on the fly. And it's cool, man. Whatever works, and we'll get it going as we go along. But yeah, it's good to be here, and I just want to. I guess the goal, we've talked a lot about what we want to do here, and we haven't really even sort of put a pin in anything, but. My perception is I just want to kind of talk about things that are going on, maybe a lot more locally, maybe some national stuff, just kind of get people involved, get people's opinions, maybe talk to people that are in the area, local representatives. Who knows? I mean, there's no really limit I want to place on this, but I just kind of want to talk and discuss what's going on in the world today. It's kind of a crazy time. I mean, Donald Trump is president. Sometimes I hear on the news, like, the most serious news person being President Trump today, and it's just like, I still kind of like, it feels like the timeline in Back to the Future a little bit,
Like, hey, look, it's Biff.
And so it's a little strange, but so we'll see what we get out of it.
So yeah, my name's Eddie. As Jason said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm kind of on the same boat as Justin. We're trying to raise awareness about some of the problems that are going on nationally and also locally. I have some experience working with government and also with nonprofits, various different capacities. So just trying to make sense of all of it, but also try to give you guys some understanding, a more simplified understanding of all the complicated bureaucracy that we experience. So we'll bring some of that knowledge into it, but also have different perspectives to some of those issues, because what I think might be the right thing to do may not be the right thing Justin sees to do, or the same thing Jason, and that's okay. As a society, we need to learn how to grow and communicate with each other in a non-violent or confrontational way. Obviously, there's a healthy way to know how to debate, And I hope that at some point we'll be able to bring in public callers to be able to engage with in a professional manner. It doesn't have to be a demeaning or type of rhetoric or anything like that. We just want to make sure that people are able to understand what are these complex issues and how it affects people. Because something such as alcohol or marijuana does affect people, and you're right, some people may not like that smell in their backyard, but also it doesn't give others the right to infringe on other people's right to be able to choose what they decide to do with their own bodies. So again, those are some of those perspectives that we can talk about.
I think you touched on something important too, which is a big part of how the discourse happens, and something I've seen happen a lot in my lifetime, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, and I'm sure you guys have too, is and especially in the light of the Russian interference, whatever level that was at with the bots promoting fake news and all this other crap, is sort of taking the discussion away from partisan politics and talking about it in a human way and not getting dragged into the Democrat Republican, because I don't and never have identified as either party. I don't necessarily believe a whole lot in the voting process, but Eddie, I think in a lot of ways is sort of the foil of that, because he's been working in the system and sort of understands that a lot of it you have to be integrated into it to be able to sort of affect change. And that's one of the things we talked about, is people not necessarily knowing where they can go and what they can do and what meetings they can attend. And it's not just about calling your congressman and leaving a voicemail. Like, it's not going to be enough. You have to put forth more effort. When people are putting $400 billion into a campaign to try to get their agenda promoted, it really has to come from more of a grassroots effort to really come out and see these people face to face. So I think that's just a big part of it, is the discourse, like he said, and just moving it away from a place where people are trying to align with a team and just sort of going, what makes sense and what's best for everybody, and how do we get there?
Mission statement. So I'll introduce myself for Eddie knows me. We're fraternity brothers. He pledged me into the fraternity back in the day. Messed me up pretty bad. No, I'm just kidding. I almost puked on him.
We're a non-hazing organization.
Non-hazing organization.
Can an organization even get away with some of the stuff that you guys probably did today?
No. No way. No. It was good. I mean, it's just different strokes for different folks. It truly is, right? But Eddie and I know each other a long time. My name's Jason, by the way. New to Phoenix area. Come from Tucson. I guess you could say I'm about as diverse as you can get. I'm not just Mexican. My name is white as hell, Japanese, I'm Native American. The tribe paid for my college education. I'm the true definition of what can be the American dream, right? You don't have to be one thing, the other, So it's interesting for me because I grew up in Tucson, mostly Hispanic population, but, because, just the opportunity, playing music, playing mariachi music, going to a school that had magnet programs, for media arts, mathematics. I went to Pueblo High School in Tucson. Academically not good, right? Really, really poor academics back then, probably better now. But my focus when I went to college was economics. Now I'm in engineering. A lot of kind of hard science training, right? So a lot of STEM, a lot of math. Economics is heavy in math, but it's also heavy in social statistics. There's something to be said about how people make choices, right? Best responses, how you make policy. I look at everything in terms of fiscal monetary policy and how that socially impacts everybody, down to how you tax things, how you price things, how you put ceilings. I'm also not Republican or Democrat. I've never really been affiliated with either party. I guess I would be more conservative now that I'm older than I was when I was younger. When I was younger, I was like a machista. I was down with all of that with our brother Carmen. That's kind of how I got into our fraternity. I met somebody. Most of us get there through kind of a group think, right? At some point, I moved away from that. I studied economics, and so now more of it is just based, what I see, what I think, what I write on my Facebook is based on just what I observe and what I think, how that's going to affect people socially. I'm going to hit something really, maybe this might lead us into our next topic, but when you do things like raising minimum wage artificially, when you have unions that get in the way to say they have their purpose, But if you don't really know the effect fiscally or monetarily that a minimum wage has either up or down, and then you go off and you execute policy based off of your good intentions, and you don't know how it affects things, minimum wage in economics, any economic student will tell you that's one of the key things that can tank an economy. It has a far more drastic effect when you artificially raise it than anything else. Anything else. The only thing that is more drastic in an economy is technology, automation, right? You instantaneously change the game when you mess with minimum wage or when you introduce new tech. Those are just fundamental theoretical things, and we have plenty of experiments throughout history of 500 years, all the way from Asia, Russia, Europe, the United States, and South America to see how these games play out. We have examples, right? We have current day examples of how they're playing out right now. So that's my background. Other than playing music, working and just doing what I do, that's just, I lay awake at night thinking about these things. And then, like I said, I just came back from California. It's very interesting to see the dynamic in LA. From LA to Santa Monica, how expensive things are, how Phoenix is kind of changing into this overly taxed system where it's like, I can go from Peoria to Tempe. I'm paying different taxes for the same goods. I can live in Peoria or work in Tempe. I'm getting taxed on my income in Tempe at a certain rate, and I'm getting taxed in a property at a certain rate where I live. I don't understand why. Maybe there's a need. Maybe there's a rate table. Maybe there's a legitimate thing that brings about those variances. But there has to be a reason. There has to be some sort of benefit economically. And I just don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see pressure for interest to rise. I don't see pressure for people to invest, right? I see pressure for people to scramble. I see, like fish in a lowering pond, they're all going to scramble to wherever there's water, right? It's a natural thing in economics, too, is that people are going to go to where there's air to breathe. I do see that. I see it in Phoenix. I see it in Cali. So that's just my background. Other than that, I just try not to cause trouble. I don't do Twitter or Instagram. I stay off of that shit because I get myself in a lot of trouble.
And you touched on an important thing, like, that pond analogy. Yeah, you're right. The fish are going to move to the direction where there's more water to be able to create space for them. And that's kind of what, and that's kind of what we're seeing also with the immigration issue is people are leaving because those situations are arising within their countries. And it's not even just their countries, it's people within the United States as well. I think I posted an article about the Bay Area increasing their low-income guidelines now, that someone that makes $117,000 a year is considered low income.
It's not dick in
And
San Francisco.
Exactly.
The whole restaurant
Setup is changing because they can't even afford to pay servers. Like they're making people come in and buy their food, serve their own food, and it's changing the whole dynamic. It's crazy.
And on top of that, like Jason was saying, there's a lot of different impact. One of the biggest things that you look at from the San Francisco issues is you start seeing the populations that already have issues of pay, which is basically social service people, police officers, fire departments. So any type of emergency type of professions are actually the ones impacted, and these are the ones that are going to come save your life when you're dying.
Yeah.
But no, let's not raise those wages.
How fast are they going to drive to the emergency scene if they're getting paid dick an hour to go risk their life?
Well, that or are they even going to be existent, or are they going to? Or are they
fire stations do
then
shut
we start
down?
Talking about third party contracting, and now we start bringing in some sort of privatization to those services. Well, and that's a whole other conversation. But
that is,
anyways, I just kind of wanted to add the parallel of migration. It's not just an international migration; it's also a national migration from state to state. And people are going to move wherever there's going to be a better situation for them, for their kids. And I think, a lot with the immigration debates and all that stuff, there's a lot of this, real fear-mongering in regards to migrants coming up from Mexico or, south of the border or anything like that. But the reality is that migration is natural. If animals are hungry, they're going to move. And there's no way you can build a wall to stop natural processes from happening. And these things have been happening for thousands and thousands of years. And
walls have never worked. Look at China. China's wall didn't work.
It's really frustrating too, because when you're talking to someone that is getting really xenophobic about the border, it's very hard to pin down what their issue is, because they'll sort of gravitate towards the crime issue at first, and then you present the data that says actually immigrants are typically committing less crime.
Yeah.
Sure, that you have the extreme violent crimes that are occurring with some of them, but it's a very small percentage. Not only that, immigration's at an all-time low in the country, and I'm pretty sure on this, but I'm almost sure that the immigration is flowing the other way. It's going more back into Mexico than it is coming in now for the last few years. It's at a low.
There's truth to that. There's real truth to that.
So when you pinpoint the crime and you do this, it's like, well, no, I'm not saying they're all criminals, but the law is the law. And then it's like, okay, well, what point do you draw the line when the law is unethical and immoral, or whatever? And then again, it becomes a question of morality. Like, there's just some people who seem to have a philosophical difference when it comes to. My perception is, okay, if you're going to send this family back, send them back together. If you're going to do this, do it together. Why does the child have to be separated from the parent while they're being vetted? And their thing is, they're a number to me. They broke the law. They're not a citizen. They're not my concern.
They have no rights.
It's not something that I really can understand,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel like something you can talk to somebody and like change their mind about. It feels like a philosophy difference.
Well, I have bone to pick with people on those two issues, right? The family issue, right? So you can take the European model. European model is kind of a class-based system, and if you're not a national, they don't even call it citizen. They think of it as national. There's a reason why there's an Italian soccer team, and why there's an English soccer team, a French and Spanish soccer team, because they look at it as a nationalism type of thing, right? Not a citizen. So when you travel in Europe and other countries, if you don't have a valid passport, they throw your ass in a dungeon. And you have no idea when you're getting out. There's no due process, right? They tell us that when I did a concert tour in Italy. They said, don't lose your passport, don't get lost, don't get separated. Because if either of those two things happen, it's very likely you'll end up in an Italian jail, and you have no rights. You're here in our country, you have no rights in our country, right? Period. You're like, okay, fine, fair enough. I had never felt like that in my life before, growing up in the United States, right? You feel very entitled, right? I have a bone to pick with people about the crime thing. If you want to stop people going back and forth across the border, you don't really need to look at immigrants. You need to look at Americans who commit crimes on their passport. The only way you get people in or out, or drugs in or out of the border, is by Americans who hold passports who can pass the border to do that shit. But we don't want to talk about that.
And going deeper on that, the American businesses that are hiring them and have the jobs waiting for them here, which we turn the other way, and there's no prosecution of the businesses for hiring people illegally.
Well, that's illegals, right? Yeah. People you have Americans bringing illegals, right? And then business hiring them.
Because they're paying taxes and paying into the pocket of Uncle Sam.
Well, yeah, there is that too.
But you have the lowest of the low, the people who are crossing the border and who have nothing. They're the ones you're targeting, not the guy with the business who's got the job waiting. And I'm not saying that either one, if they're breaking the law, you shouldn't go after both. But I mean, it just seems like an imbalance. Again, the white collar CEO not seeing any jail time, and the guy who makes $15 an hour who pushed the actual button got fired, lost his job, whatever the case may be in the situation like that. It feels a little bit like that scenario to me, where we're sort of focusing our ire on the wrong people. And again, with the drug war, same deal. The cartels, and it's like, well, we buy it.
Yeah.
We pay for it.
We pay for it. We export our dollars to import drugs.
Personal responsibility.
20 million Americans, I think, was the last statistic. 20 million Americans buy drugs from overseas, from Canada, and from Mexico. And you don't get a Mexican national across the border without an American national smuggling them in. It just does not happen. Those that try it usually end up getting shot by the Border Patrol because they got nothing to lose, right? There's a lot of spin associated with that, but that's just a fact. I grew up in Tucson. I went to high school with kids like this. I go to high school with kids that are American-born, second or third generation, in high school. Their parents are connected, right? You always say they're connected. It's kind of a thing you don't really want to talk about, right? You just go to school. if you make bad choices as a young American kid who speaks Spanish, it's really easy to get involved in that kind of life. Most do because why? Their parents maybe don't have a good economic situation. Maybe you don't have the academics in school. Maybe you go to a shit school that says you're never going to amount to anything. That does happen, right? I've seen it happen. Maybe you're over-policed. I remember going to school. I made good grades. I was in all the clubs and stuff like that. I was on the radio program. I'm recognizable in my school. I'm not a popular guy. I'm not a troublemaker, right? I'm not a drug dealer. But when we have school events, there's police at that high school, and you're not white, you're brown. You know, you're a young brown Mexican kid, even though I'm only a quarter Mexican. I get treated just like everybody else. You know, I'm walking into a place, I'm getting searched by the police. If I'm out and about in South Tucson at night minding my own business, we're still going to get stopped by the police. That's just going to happen. You know, maybe we're not supposed to.
By the way, you don't see any, high school shootings in situations like that.
You don't see a lot of high school shootings in poor neighborhoods because there's already enough shit going on in the neighborhood. And it's like school is supposed to be a safe place.
It's supposed to be escape at that point for them. School is getting
it's
away
like,
from
I don't have to fucking deal with it.
8 hours of I don't have to worry about
someone trying to kill me. Yeah, exactly.
But talking about the border and getting pulled around, it reminded me of a time you and I were working down in Tucson. I think you took a wrong turn somewhere by the hotel or something. And he got pulled over and harassed by border. And this was in Tucson. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like we were even in Nogales or anything like that.
They'll just come, habla inglés. I'm like, yeah, I speak English, motherfucker. How you like that? And they're like, oh, okay.
You're like, yes, I was born in Phoenix. Thank you.
Yeah, it happens for real in Tucson. You know, shout out to Tucson. It happens.
Touching back,
yeah, exactly.
But touching back on what you were saying about, having an American passport, and, those are the people that kind of have to be watched in the sense that they're the ones bringing in, smuggling people or smuggling drugs. But at the same time, too, there is a lot of people that get visas from Mexico that are Mexican nationals that are able to obtain a visa. So what is that process looking like? I mean, I'm sure there is some sort, other than the money, because in my family that lives in Mexico,
school and work,
they just want to know, exactly. They want to know, do you go to school? Do you work? Do you have the money to pay for the visa? Fine. Everything else is done. So then, I think there's like a missed opportunity there to check that, because I'm guarantee you that there are people with visas that are maybe paid by cartels to bring in drugs through. And then at that point, when they get sent to Eloy or whatnot, those prisons, after they get caught, then they get deported. And that's the end of it.
They get killed when they get back to Mexico. They get put in an oil drum for screwing up. See, there's context, right? There's context growing up in certain parts of the country where, they're committing crimes. It's like, okay, what do you do?
A misdemeanor. The first time.
Yeah, exactly. It's a misdemeanor.
Which means you're speeding.
Yeah.
Like, are we separating you from your children and throwing you in a cell, vetting your everything because you were speeding? Like, that's
very callous to say they're committing crimes. We're going to just ignore their human rights. But there is also a thing where, say you get yourself as a young kid or a 20-year-old adult or a 40-year-old divorced woman that has no skill set, right? And you get involved in that life, right? Some people are faced with an option of, hey, look, I'll pay you money. If you don't take the money, I'm going to burn your house down. I'm going to murder you and your children. Mm-hmm. There's a reality for some people who are too close to that gets overlooked by the media to say, we should help these people. They're in a situation where on one side of the fence, they either commit a crime or they could become a target, or they commit a crime and they go to prison.
To me, the problem is the perspective that you're looking at it from, because not you, but the people that have an issue with this. If you're looking at it like it's a crime, you're looking at this situation as if it's happening in a vacuum. You're not looking at why this person is coming here. You're not looking at
demand.
Look at
There's a demand
Honduras and El Salvador maybe are two of like the top 5 most deadly places in the world or something like that. You're talking
which are socialism, by the way.
More than Afghanistan, more than Iraq, more than all these war zones.
Also socialist.
You have to stop and go, why is this? Well, when you look back at, again, Eddie and I were talking the other night about just the way that American corporations and American government have sort of tilled the soil in Central, South America, and Mexico for their own benefit. They've sort of shifted the cost to those people. They've never let those countries develop at the pace that they should have. And now you've got countries like Honduras and El Salvador where the drug trade is the only viable option because they can't grow crops because we're subsidizing everything. Dole owns whatever amount of ridiculous acreage down there and whoever else. And then you have the issue is that these people have no other viable option but the drugs. And then so you have things like MS-13 and all these other gangs down there that are controlling the government because we've left them no options. So again, you're looking at this border crossing as a crime that's being committed as if it was jaywalking or something else that has no context, when in reality there's a lot of deep context that's associated.
There is. And on the same side, there are companies that hire people that have high skill sets in Mexico, that are commercial, that are not exploitative. They are cheaper. And I would say that an engineer in Mexico doesn't cost the same as this. Yeah, exactly. But the skill set is there, but like an engineer in Mexico doesn't cost the same in US dollars as an engineer in the United States. That's a fact. Now, is it a good thing, bad thing? I don't know. What would an engineer in Mexico make if the company wasn't there? Zero. They'd have to find a way to migrate to the United States. So there is an economic benefit to some companies, right? Others maybe don't have the moral compass that other companies do.
Just
right?
real quick, and you guys may know more about this than I do. I'm not sure, but it feels to me more like the Central American issue, some of the El Salvador, Nicaragua, or Honduras. Those issues, they're having worse issues than even Mexico is at this point. Like Mexico is a little more stable, and like I said, it seems like the migration is flowing the other way there. But I think most of the trouble and the people seeking asylum are coming from Central America and stuff like that.
I wonder about Eddie's perspective, because you're more the government person than I am. I don't get into many politics, but Mexico is a republic, right? They're a democratic republic just like the United States, right? They have an electoral process. Most of those South American countries are socialists. They have elections, but most of them, if you look at some of these elections year to year or decade to decade, are landslides. When you see landslide elections in many what would be democratic process countries, you have a degree of socialism there. And I think like the French, like most Middle Eastern countries that have monarchs and then some sort of elective process, right? It doesn't bode well for the people. In Central America, like Ecuador, Salvador, we had in the 1980s, El Salvador had a civil war because people were starving, and then they got democracy. They had a civil war, and then all of a sudden they're socialists. And so now the socialists are murdering everybody else, and now they're just the ones that are in power, right? So if you're religious, if you're Catholic, they would kill you, right? It was really interesting, all that stuff.
Well, it's almost in the way, because you have stuff like Pinochet, or you have stuff like Pineapple Face, Noriega, and all that, where the U.S. was literally had a CIA agent who was the president of a sovereign nation.
Yeah.
So you have these socialist nations. It's almost beneficial for the United States in a way, because everything can be centralized under the government, and then now you've got the government, and so now you've got everything under one. You don't have to worry about 20 different companies that you're fighting over trying to make them conglomerate under you. Dole can go in and do what they want, because now you've got the government in your pocket. Something that goes back, it's always weird with America, because I have this really I didn't mention earlier I was born in El Paso. So same thing, I'm kind of a mutt. My mom's side of the family's Hispanic. My dad is German and white as it gets from Texas.
So you know what it's like to be on near Juarez,
literally
and on that border.
And I kind of felt like I had that border in me, just as a person with the two completely different sides of the family I have.
It's dangerous.
So, but in America, you have this same kind of dichotomy where it's like there is this idea and this passion in the people that anything's possible, that it is a land of opportunity, and that is a reality. But the other part of it is that in a way, none of that really existed in this country. It was manufactured. The very first thing this country did as soon as we became a sovereign nation was right after in the 1800s, we invaded Hawaii. Hawaii had a queen. Hawaii had a monarch. They were a sovereign nation. and we went in with our business interests for cane sugar, and we
export.
appropriated it, and the government stamped it after the fact, and we threw the Queen in jail at one point. Like, it was just a mess, and that has been the U.S.'s MO from the beginning. They've papered it up and kind of doctored it up nicely, and like I said, I love that idea. In a lot of ways, it is a reality. I'm sure we're all living examples of that. Like, we're not really struggling in the way that a lot of people are in the world. We have our own struggles, I'm sure, but this country has been good to us in a lot of ways, but it's really shitty to a lot of people around the world. And that's sort of where I come from, is like, I don't want to just sit and enjoy my life and then keep the wall up and keep everybody out because we're doing good here. It's like, no, you need to pay back. You need to understand that this country has blood on its hands in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad or evil. It's people. That's how we are. But, I mean, at some point we have to own up to that and not just blame the people that are trying to come across the border. It's crazy, man.
And international politics are pretty hard to kind of weigh in on.
Yeah,
because
different contexts.
Because, I mean, the first thing you got to understand is we're dealing with different cultures. The United States has one culture. Western Europe has a different culture. Mexico has a different culture. Asia has a different culture. And we have to understand that when we're developing governments. That's why when you invade another country and you're saying we're going to implement democracy in Iraq, it doesn't work, because the first thing you're doing is you're already clashing with a culture. And that's what's hard about it, is that you're clashing with a culture, and you're not letting that culture kind of decide what's the best type of government. And a lot of it may come in education. It may be education. It may be allowing that community to actually build its own system of government, or maybe they had a system of government for over 100 years, and we're coming in and telling them that they're wrong in the way they're governing. One thing that's interesting is like Abu Dhabi, for example. They still have a monarch.
Yeah.
And they have one of the best and most developed social services system in the world. They have found a way to trickle down oil money into their citizens.
Due to their religion.
And it's because that's what their monarchs have been doing for hundreds of years. They have this sense of public service. Now, are they perfect? Probably not.
Probably not. They probably hoard a lot of money in oil.
Exactly. Probably a lot of people died. There's probably some
get
questionable...
that building going right
There's
now.
probably some questionable laws, but for the most part, their basis of their existence...
They're taking care of their people.
And how they feel that they should be governed is in their hands.
Yeah.
Their families are deciding how they should be governed. And they're okay with that. And it's one of the most...
They're fed.
Yeah, exactly.
They have food in their fridge. They have a roof. They're used to the heat. And they have food in their belly.
And comparatively
What
with
else
the
can you ask
Middle
for?
East, that country is one of the most
Wealthiest.
welcoming
Yeah.
to the Western world, and is one of the most sought after vacation places. People don't view that place as
Hostile.
it's not.
You need
Iraq.
money.
It's not
You need
Afghanistan.
money to
You
go
need money, but
there.
It's sort of like, hey, there's some of the good ones, or that's sort of the way people look at it, and that is sort of. I'm sure what's been in the mind of them is, hey, let's make this a little more inviting. If we're going to sustain and last, we can't be combative.
Tolerance.
We have to be welcome.
There's a measure of tolerance there.
But it's also tolerance based on what they feel is tolerable. You can't go into a foreign country and say, we're going to start a revolution for you because the American democracy is what you should be going for. And those are questionable actions because you're not taking that culture into consideration. Another country that isn't as free as the United States is Singapore. And Singapore actually also has a very developed social services type of in government. They've won numerous awards for the UN for e-governance, which basically allows them to connect to their citizens. Do they have questionable laws? Of course. I mean, you can get thrown in jail for littering. So, I mean, some of those things. But that works for them.
LA could use that law. It's fucking filthy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as welcoming as Dubai is and all those things, I think there's still some crazy liquor laws and things like that to do with their religion. But again, like you said, it's something that works for them, and that's one of the things that's really frustrating sometimes is American hubris, is that idea that somehow we know better than everybody when it's like really we're a baby as far as countries are concerned. I look at a country like China, and I am just in awe at the way they've been able to hold together their culture, their government,
Thousands
and
of
sort
years.
maintain a vision of what they want and life. They just really have not strayed much from that, and that's impressive. And it's also a little scary because we don't have our shit together in this country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We really don't.
We're kind of like that cocky rookie that comes onto the football team. Is like, you don't know how to tackle. I'll show you how to tackle. It's like, well, all right, you might get a lot more tackles than most average players. You're going to get fucked up at a certain point, and we're going to let it happen and watch.
So here's an interesting statistic, for example. Taking a look at a survey done by the UN called the Freedom in the World. And it's based on regions. So like America, for example, you have 24, there are 195 countries in the world that basically participate in this survey.
How many do we have bases in?
So
everyone.
In the Americas, you got 24 countries that are considered free. And to be considered free, you're talking about there's open political competition, a climate of respect for civil liberties, significant independent civic life, and independent media. Now, there are 10 countries in Americas that are partly free. Now, partly free means that the states frequently suffer from corruption, weak rule of law, ethnic and religious strife, and a political landscape in which every single party enjoys dominance despite a certain degree of pluralism. And then not free. So in the Americas, there's one country that is not free, and that basically means that the country has one where there's basic political rights are absent and basic civil liberties are widely and systematically denied. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But it was just interesting when I was reading this because it's talking about like how many countries are free, partly free, and not free. And in the Americas, you see that like one country is not free. So most of them have been influenced in some way, shape, or form by something, but also found their way. But you got about 28% of that isn't really finding their way just yet. But you look at like the Middle East region, for example, you got one country that is free, 6 that are partly free, and 11 that are not free. So, yes, are they questionable laws? Yes, but then what gives us the right to go to that region and tell them, you know, we start talking about, you know, that movie, Team America, you know, the World Police, and it's like, what gives us the right to go to another country like that who has selected to be that way and say that we're going to help them become free? Well, to become free, they would have to revolt on themselves and have self-determination to be able to, and also education to be able to create a new system of government for themselves. Now, maybe we should be investing in education rather than investing in guns to send over there with troops who are being endangered every single day and coming back with PTSD and then leading us into this whole freaking rabbit hole of social services and, you know, that we can't even begin to address. And now we have, you know, people with some serious mental health issues who are highly trained to kill people.
Highly trained to kill people.
But anyways,
That's a really interesting statistic. I don't know, guys. We've been talking for a little bit. We're at about that time limit mark that we had set for our initial podcast. It goes fast, doesn't it?
It really does.
You guys nervous? I've been doing YouTube for about a couple of years now. I'm just like, here's my camera. Okay, I'm all good. That was an interesting statistic. And I agree. It's very true. It just made me think of one thing. Like, we were born in this country, right? I think that there's something to be said, like how you said the desire to be free, right? There's something to be said why our metaphorical flag has red and white in it. It does require blood, and it requires blood willingly, right? That's something that we forget. It requires the population to willingly sacrifice. I love that word. I've loved that word ever since we were in school, and even now getting older, right? I think about that word, sacrifice. It requires it, right? But you got to be careful. You got to be careful for manipulation. I don't know. It's crazy. Any last remarks? My new good friend Justin?
No, I just agree. Like you said, to be wary of manipulation. Touched on it early on in the pod, but I think the dialogue is really important. Words have a ton of power, and sometimes the media and people in power will try to take that power away and pretend that words don't have power, and they really do. And
they do.
You know, the power to discuss and be able to talk about these things is important. And I think I'm not sure how old you are, but I'm sure you're close in age to Eddie and I. But I think everybody
in my 30s,
in that range of age that we're in, and maybe just a couple years older, has an obligation to sort of try to set things right, because we have a unique perspective of sort of being immersed in the old world not only pre 9/11 but pre-internet and all this stuff, and really growing up in it and knowing that world before and now the world is completely different. We sort of have to be able to bridge that, because there's a lot of things that are lost in the insanity of political correctness and fear, where we sort of have to touch base back with the old things and the old traditions and be like, not everything that's new and shiny is what's perfect and what works. Sometimes the old shit is what's good, and
it was built on the previous.
Exactly. History is something we touched on too, which is very important. History's forgotten a lot, not only with the border but with the war on drugs and everything. It repeats itself even in that way, that people forget.
There's context.
History repeats itself.
Context is important. All right, gentlemen. Well, I think that's going to do it. Eddie, any last words? I got no more words. I got my scotch. I'm going to eat dinner soon. I'm good. I'm happy.
I think a lot of things were covered. We talked about a lot of things today.
Mental diarrhea just all over the mics.
It's all over the place. But I think if you want to leave with something today, is that there are definitely some morality questions that we have to answer as a society and as Americans, and especially in our dealings internationally, but also like in our dealings with the people in our own backyard, with our neighbors. And I think we're not really answering any of those questions, and we're not really even willing to open the book on those things. And I think we're kind of falling short on that. And I think we need to fix those things before we start meddling in international politics. And I think we're wasting a lot of money and a lot of time and resources in those things when we should be. And in that sense, I mean, I do feel on some of the Trump agenda, but I think it is a little misguided because it is missing some ethics and morality in it as well. But at the same time, I do agree with some of those things that they are saying. I might not agree with everything. I'm not a Trump supporter, but, I am for Americans, and I do want to see that, and I see it every day when I go to work and I see all these homeless people outside, and it's like, I work for a homeless program. Why can't I address these issues right outside of my office? And that's really like the mentality that we should have is, well, you can impact the circle that is directly closest to you. If we're a homeless prevention organization, then why don't we help the homeless outside of our door? And those are questions that we all as Americans need to answer on a lot of things. And I think this is a start of that type of conversation, but I think it is a morality check for all of us.
Nice. All right, guys. It's been a fun cast. We still got to figure out what we're going to call this thing, if we're going to make it a regularly occurring series. Mental diarrhea. That might actually be kind of catchy, because we're just talking about shit here. We'll try mental. I don't think that's going to be very marketable or appealing to advertisers. We
This
gotta get
hour
that
of
made.
Mental Diarrhea brought to you by Glenlivet 15-year Scotch. Enjoy it. Finger with a friend.
I like that. All right, we're going to end on that. Fingers with a friend. All right, thanks, gentlemen.